Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Bent Limbs podcast. I'm your host, Matt Thielking. Today on episode 14, I know we haven't done one in a while, guys, but this is one that I think it's the perfect time to focus on this, and that is gaining new access for 2024. And the reason I want to do this one, not just because it's the best time of year to concentrate on this, at least in my opinion, it is, but because hunter access is a really big topic in just the hunting media, hunting industry, the last, I would say, year or two. And truth be told, that's because of the lack of hunter access. I don't think that's anything that's a shock to people is that finding places to hunt that aren't overcrowded or literally just finding places to hunt in general, it's not as easy as it used to be. But I don't want to try to solve necessarily the hunter access issue on this podcast. What I want to do is give you guys some tips to help you still gain access, even though it might be more of a grind than it used to be. Okay. So that's what I want to dive into today, you guys. And really, truly, I think for looking forward for 2024 hunting season, for the deer hunting season, now really is an opportune time to get on this, get some things in the works, and help to solidify some different areas, some different properties, some different places that you can hunt in 2024 to make that season a success. So I kind of broke my notes down, you guys, into two different topics, if you want to call it that. I kind of tried to separate it on like a public and private side, but I lumped in one thing. I kind of called it guaranteed access is one thing, and then gaining new access is another. And what I want to focus on first is the guaranteed access part. So when I think of guaranteed access, I think of public land and I think of private land. And the private land that I think of as guaranteed is either you own it or your family owns it, where it's not a lease, it's not just a permission, it's something that you are essentially 100% or maybe 99% confident that you will be able to hunt that each and every year. So we'll kind of nip off real quick just the family owned or you owning property, or it's, I guess that could come into you buying property. That is obviously kind of like the bread and butter of everybody's access to hunting. Like if you've got that, and I know not everybody does, or not everybody has it on the scale as others, but depending on your scale of it, that could be that could be it for you. That could be all you need, or that could just be kind of the center point of the hunting that you do and the properties that you do it on. And that is a totally cool thing. If you've got that and you've got experience on a property, something that you've got history with, that is really the core year in and year out to your success. And you being able to leverage your experiences of previous seasons, you know, uh, historical data, all those type of things to ultimately be successful out there in the woods. So that's really all I want to spend on that, though. That is probably your core if you've got that, and it still should be your core. But let's expand a little bit beyond just that core to make sure other variables out there don't impact your season success. And what I mean by other variables is like, look, you guys, we can't control everything out there in the woods. Obviously, that. So things like, you know, could be you blowing up the property because you hit a deer and it took you a long time to find it, or maybe you didn't find it. You had to stomp all over the place. Could be EHD or CWD or some other disease that decimates a particular area where your core is now not ideal. Could be trespassers. There's a lot of variables kind of like that, where if you only have one core hunting property, you're limiting yourself just to that and not hedging your bets as far as if you want to call it like being diverse, or if you thought of it as like a portfolio for your investments, of having a diverse portfolio. That's kind of the mindset that I've started to take into hunting and gaining access, is having a lot of different options in a lot of different areas, and it's helped me the last couple of years. So you've got that core property, hopefully you do, or maybe you do, um, but expanding that, and we'll start with the public side of things. Expanding that to some public is not a bad thing. Public land, for the most part, should be guaranteed access for you. That's not saying that it's not going to be crowded, or that people aren't going to screw up your hunts, or that weird stuff isn't going to happen out there. I mean, that's kind of just the nature of public land. But having public, or exploring public, scouting public in your back pocket can be a really good thing. It can be a property that, maybe you don't even hunt a year or two, but you've scouted, you've put some cameras out. You at least know that if you need to hunt another area, you've got a spot that has a certain percentage, a certain expectation level of success, maybe what a particular buck might look like coming off of that piece of property, or maybe it's not even that. Maybe it's just the ability to harvest a deer in general. But having some public just in your, if you want to call it, hunting portfolio, I think is a really good thing. I'll give you guys an example. There's some public, there's quite a bit in my area, and there's quite a bit that I've hunted. There's quite a bit that I hunt every year, and there's some that I have never hunted, but I've run cameras on them, I've scouted them. I kind of know, if I'm going to take a stab at a particular spot, when I might want to do it. And, truth be told, I, a lot of times I haven't taken that stab because that window of time was, seemed like better odds on another property. But just literally having that, and having some pictures and some historical data, some level of scouting on those properties, like knowing that I can go dive into them, and knowing when kind of the window is to dive into them, maybe even what day of the week, which on public land I would typically like to be in there, middle of the week, for a little less pressure. Or some spots, honestly, when there is pressure, they can filter some deer through and actually be better. But just having that in my back pocket, if I ever need it, is a really comforting feeling. So I would just encourage you guys, like right now, here in February, when there really isn't a whole heck of a lot to do, get out there, just figure out a little bit of public, do some scouting, pick a few spots to put some cameras. If you don't hunt them, you know what? No harm, no foul. If you do, hopefully you learn something, but just develop another guaranteed access spot that has some potential that you can leverage if you need it. When it comes to, I'll give you guys this too, when it comes to putting cameras out on public, I highly encourage getting those cameras up high. So get them not only out of the deer's line of sight, but out of human line of sight as best as you can. I usually like to get them up high enough where someone would have to use a climbing stick to even touch them, and then run some type of a lock. Just so, I mean, I know it sucks when people mess with your cameras, when they take them, when they take your card, when they clear your card, like all that kind of stuff. It sucks that that goes on public. I'd recommend doing those few things to just mitigate people messing with your stuff. Um, so on the public side of things, that's really what I've got, is just don't be afraid to just explore it, check it out, figure out some spots where you can run a couple cameras, um, and see if you can have something in your back pocket for the future. Now, on the private side of things, there's a lot here, and there's a lot here that I've kind of learned, and a lot here that I've, um, hunted, dabbled in, and kind of figured out. So first thing is, let's talk about, they're almost like public land, but they're typically private land open to public hunting. They can be things like, at least here in Michigan, and I know everybody's area is different, but they could be things like um, land conservations or wildlife conservations. They could be things like commercial forest properties. They could be hunter access program properties, like things that are not quite as highly advertised as just straight up public, whether it be state or federal land, but they're ones that can be really good spots. It kind of just goes a little bit back to the public side of finding them, figuring them out a little bit, scouting, leveraging them. What is sweet about some of these properties, though, like for here in Michigan, the commercial forest land, for example, there's quite a bit of it around. You can find it on Onyx, but it's not easily marked from like a roadside. It doesn't just sit there and a lot of them don't sit there and say like, hey, this is open to public hunting. A lot of them are just, if you drove by them, you would never know. Those can be good, even if you can spot them from Onyx. They just draw less attention than your traditional public lands. Uh, Specialized like units, like land conservation type of units, those are ones where you can call your local, whether it's your township or county. Don't be afraid to call and ask about those, because sometimes they allow people to hunt on them. They don't advertise it, but if you call them and just ask, hey, I noticed in my area there's a wildlife conservation area. It says nothing about being open to public. I know it's open to foot traffic and stuff, but is there any way you would allow me to hunt out there? And if you would, do you all have management expectations or goals or things like that? You might be surprised what you find out in essentially gaining um, access to hunt that. And a lot of times it's limited. And really the only way to get it is to you be the one initiating those type of things. And then like hunter access type of program properties where private landowners are letting the public go out and hunt them. I would treat those a lot like the public land in general, but they can again be kind of something that might not be as widespread news, as highly advertised as stuff. Basically, all of these type of things, I know they kind of fall into the public bucket, but they are ones that if you're not afraid to put some miles on, do some legwork, scout, hang some cameras, even if you don't touch any of them for a year or maybe even 2 years, you run cameras for a year or two, you'll start to figure out kind of which ones have some potential, which ones you can put in your back pocket, which ones you can't. So I'm just saying, don't be afraid to do that. Now, let's talk like straight up private. Let's talk like door knocking type of private. This is the one I think when we talk about hunter access being limited, being not what it used to be, I think this is one where everybody first gravitates to. And for good reason, because it's definitely not as easy as it used to be. A lot of people lease property, and that's certainly an option. If you want to do that and you can find a great lease, I mean, do it if you can afford it and it's worth it. But there's still opportunities, you guys, to gain access from a permission basis. It's it's harder, and you're going to get no's, and you're going to have to probably knock on a lot of doors, but you can get it. All right. So the first thing is, I like to start now. If I'm going to be looking for a deer hunting property for this hunting season, I want to start now. And I want to start the conversations with this landowner not at all about deer hunting. There is a lot of other stuff going on right now that not many people are doing. Shed hunting, that could be one. That could be your gateway into getting to know this particular landowner. And that really is the key, is building a relationship and getting to know the landowner and getting permission to do something that is higher odds than deer hunting and not as popular as deer hunting. So shed hunting, that's certainly gaining popularity, but that's one. Just ask if you can walk around and see if you can find some sheds. Another one that you could ask a potential landowner to do, predator hunting or small game hunting. There's still, at least here in Michigan, there's still small game like squirrel and rabbit and stuff that's open. Maybe you just want to go on a nice Saturday afternoon rabbit hunt. Anything like that that is just your foot in the door, man, use it, because there's not that many people out there doing that right now. And I don't think farmers or landowners really care that much about squirrels and rabbits and coyotes as they do with, or as the general population does with deer. So use those type of things, you guys. That is really your foot in the door, because what you're doing is you're getting out there. The pressure is lower on you to initiate that conversation. It's a much easier yes, I feel like, to the landowner, because there's not much going on right now. And at least then when you ask for deer hunting permission, or you ask about it, it's way easier on both of you. I have found that to be very key, in that the amount of yeses I've gotten on properties is far greater if I have asked for something else first, or asked to do something else first, and kind of slow played the deer hunting thing, than if I just knock on a door and ask if I can deer hunt. That's fairly low odds in my opinion. Um, Speaking to the low odds things, you guys really just have to play the odds game. If you think there is a 1% chance in your surrounding area that you can find private land to get just a permission free access to, then I guess you got to find 100 doors to knock on. Think of it that way. Or maybe it's 5% or whatever the percentage you think it is in your area. That's how many doors you're going to have to knock on. Don't be afraid to mark a whole bunch of stuff on Onyx or whatever mapping service you use as like, hey, these are spots I'd like to hunt. Let's, I guess, see, and just play the numbers game, play the odds game. The chances of you getting a permission property if you knocked on 100 doors, certainly a lot higher than if you knocked on 10. So don't be afraid to play that game, because I think that is important. There are properties out there to have access to by simply building a relationship with a landowner, knocking on doors, trying to get your foot in the door and get to know them, have them get to know you. It's certainly less. So you're just going to have to do more of it to really find that type of stuff. But don't be afraid to do that. Um, Another thing, when you knock on said door, if you have zero relationship at all or have never met this landowner, I kind of think of trying to play the middle as far as, like, honestly, even what you wear. So don't show up in like you know, I don't think any of you would do this, but like, don't show up in like a freaking suit and tie type of thing. Like, they're going to think you're some salesman or some solicitor or that type of thing. Like, you don't need to be dressed like you're going to your best friend's wedding. Um, on the flip side, you don't need to be dressed like you just, you know, crawled out of a swamp from hunting all day. Like, you don't need to show up in your beat up Carhartts and camo shirt and camo hat looking like you're ready to hunt right now. Be somewhere in the middle. Um, just look like a normal guy or girl, you know, nice jeans, some type of nice shirt, and maybe a camo hat type of thing. Like, also, I like to leverage, like, if you work for a well-known company, I don't know, let's say you work for Ford, or you work for Milwaukee Tool, or you work for, I don't know, um, Samsung or something. I don't know. A big company in your area that is recognized, John Deere, Caterpillar, things like that. If you work at a place that is, well respected, kind of known in your area, um, don't be afraid to kind of like wear a pullover or a polo or a thing like that with like your company's logo on it, and then maybe I don't know, camo hat or just something like that where it's like, hey, you know, I'm a responsible person that likes to hunt type of thing. That is what I've done. That seems to work well. Where I wear like my a pullover with my company logo on it, jeans, and like a hat. So I don't look like a solicitor, but I don't look like somebody that's just showing up ready to hunt. And the first thing I typically say is I am not here to solicit or sell you anything. I just wanted to introduce myself and ask you a couple questions related to your property and whether I might be able to do a little coyote hunting or shed hunting or whatever. Um, Something like that, especially starting with like, I'm not here to sell you anything, is usually kind of a funny ice break. Not even really funny, but it just kind of breaks the ice. Like you can kind of laugh about it and they'll usually crack a smile and be a little more engaged and hear what you have to say. um Look at both when you're looking for these said properties and kind of trying to get your foot in the door, trying to look for something other than just deer hunting. Look for both big and small. I think a lot of us, when we go around thinking about what properties in our area we'd like to hunt, it's pretty easy to highlight the farms or the particular blocks of woods that we're like, oh man, this is dynamite. This is really good. I know this has a ton of potential. Those are great. Don't be afraid to go ask on them, but just know like they might be the ones that everybody's also knocking on that door or that somebody already hunts, just because if you can pick it out on Onyx as something that is looks really good, there's a good chance somebody else has. I'm not saying don't go there. I'm just saying be prepared for potentially a no. What you can pick out though are there look at kind of that same general area, um, and what makes that area maybe good. See if there's some smaller parcels. See if instead of all these farms that are 80 100 acres, or maybe where you're at even bigger than that, couple 100 acres, is there a little 10-acre sliver in there somewhere that is part of this bigger agricultural and woods and swamp, just kind of what looks like the flow of wildlife, the flow of deer in this area? Is there a sliver or two in there that maybe look a little under the radar? Those can be really good ones, you guys, because there's going to be deer moving through there. You probably not going to hold deer. You're probably not going to have bedding on it, maybe per se, if it's a small parcel. But if you know that whole general area is good, and maybe it's in a little bit of a funnel, or maybe it's in right at the edge of some of that big ag, or a piece of that big hardwoods and swamp and that kind of stuff, man, those can be really good. And those can be ones that people kind of overlook just because they know they might only get a stand in there, or they might not be able to hunt it a ton, or man, it just looks a little residential, or it's not that big, or whatever all those excuses might be. Those can be little gems because not as many people are thinking that as a prime new deer hunting spot, as they are some of the bigger stuff. So just try to look for some of those little slivers, those little gems, especially out in that big ag country. And honestly, it doesn't have to be just big ag type of country, or big woods or big swamp or whatever it is in your area. It can be urban. Poke around on some of the areas where hunting is probably less popular. Now, this is getting certainly more popular than it used to be, especially with some shows like the guys from Seek One and stuff showing how you can find and kill big urban deer. Um, it's certainly less of a secret, and it's certainly something that more people are targeting today. But I still think there's a lot of opportunity out there for those type of spots. Just be prepared. You are going to get a lot of no's on this type of stuff. And I think you just have to be ready to accept that. But again, I think leading in potentially with something like a shed hunt or, you know, if you can, a small game hunt, or I know it depends in urban zones with what you can and can't do, what weapons you can and can't use, all that type of stuff. Like these are a little different. You got to make sure you're abiding by your city or township or whatever regulations. But if you can get to know some of those people, you can find some absolute slobs that hang out in urban areas, or maybe it's where urban kind of meets the rural. Maybe it's, honestly, just keeping your ear to the ground with your coworkers, with your friends, people you meet at your kids' sporting events or at church or things like that. Like you might be surprised at where and how you can get access if you're just kind of keeping your ear to the ground a little bit, especially on some of those smaller urban parcels. So don't overlook those, you guys. And I think too, this is one thing that really helped me because it's always super tough to just go blind and knock on a door, try to get permission to go hunting, even if all you're asking is to squirrel hunt or coyote hunt or turkey hunt or something like that, something less popular. Like it's still, you're less nervous, but you're still nervous about it. One thing I've found actually really helpful is if you're picking a day where you're going to kind of knock on some doors or maybe a week or whatever, like, or the very first one you're going to go do, pick one where you know you're going to get a no. The very first one you go to, pick one where you're 99% sure that person is going to say no, because you get a no out of the way. You get that um, sense of whatever, rejection, failure, all that type of stuff. You get it out of the way. And you get a chance to just kind of see how someone is going to deliver that no to you. And honestly, a lot of times it's way the no goes way better than you think it's going to go. And you can just practice your kind of script or your routine, whatever you want to call it, in a way where you're not expecting to receive a yes. It's like your practice run on someone where you kind of gain confidence, you see how they react, and you're like, oh man, that honestly, you know what? That no wasn't that bad, and that person was really nice. And hey, you never know, maybe something changes. I've had some where I haven't gained access, I should say, but I've gone to a big farm where I know a bunch of people hunt, and I've done that. And the farmer was like super nice, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry, we've got several people who hunt, but no, I really appreciate you coming down and introducing yourself. I know who you are. I know you live just down the street. Hey, if anything ever changes out here, some spots open up, I'll be sure to swing by now that I've met you and let you know that there's a spot open to hunt." It's like boom. I got a no, but I also got kind of a maybe in the future just by going to a place where I was basically guaranteed a no. It's one where you never know what might happen. And it certainly takes the edge off, and it makes some of those other ones, especially those ones that maybe you've marked that you really want, they make them easier because you've gone up to someone, you knocked on their door, you introduced yourself, you talked to them, you got to know, and you figured out this isn't that bad. And I can do this, and I can keep doing this, and I can keep refining my speech, if you want to call it that. And I think if you do that, I think you would be surprised to find that there is access still out there. You're going to have to pound the pavement a little bit. You're going to have to ask for maybe hunting permission for some things that you really don't care that much to hunt um, or do, but it is out there. It is. If you play the numbers game, if you strategically kind of think about where you're going, what you're wearing, how you're going to talk to them, and just don't be afraid to do it. There's private access out there for you guys to gain. I know access is an issue in the hunting industry. I do. I get it, especially with people leasing stuff, with a lot of people buying stuff up, with public land getting crowded. But if you think of 2024 like you were building an investment portfolio, every financial investor you ever talk to will tell you about diversity. It could be in like a mutual fund where there's a whole bunch of stocks, but I'm kind of thinking of this as like you are picking a whole bunch of different options. You're trying to build a catalog of different options, different areas, different deer herds, maybe different peak hunting times for different properties where you've got your eggs in multiple baskets and not just one. So if you blow something up, if EHD pings an area, if trespassers, if whatever happens, you're not sitting there upset that your hunting area is no longer a great one for a portion of time. You've got a lot of other options. You've got a lot of other bucks to chase. You've got a lot of other things, in the works. I really think that'll help you guys. And, don't be afraid to, I guess I'll say, as you communicate with landowners, um, you know, feel them out. Don't be afraid to slow play some of your accesses. I know we're talking about 2024, and I want this to be centered around helping people get more access in 2024, but you might get access to turkey hunt and the deer hunt might be a no. You might get access to coyote hunt. The deer hunt might be a no. But that's okay. Just keep going, keep popping in, keep making your presence known and letting that landowner get to know that you are a good human being. You're respecting his property. You're thanking him. You're, shaking his hand. Maybe you give him a gift card at the end of the year type of thing. Some of the slow plays too can result in it might not be hunting access on private land in 2024, but in a year or two when the their grandson goes off to college and that farmer's no longer got someone hunting that property, or maybe a guy that leases it is now no longer leasing it. You know what? You are the one that is fresh in their mind as someone that you've built trust with them. You've shown them that you're a respectful person and that the long game too can be a way to get access to more deer hunting property. It really is all about making impression and figuring out a way to make that as easy on yourself, as easy on the landowner as possible. Just getting your foot in the door and hopefully that leading to you getting more access in 2024. Guys, this is something that I'm going to be focusing on here in the coming weeks, because I think February, March, and then that like even April and May timeframe when you start getting into spring turkey season, man, it is such a good time to do this. And I don't want you guys to miss out on this time because it really is critical to just kind of setting the foundation, I think, for your 2024 deer season and hopefully gaining you guys some new hunting spots, diversifying your hunting portfolio that I hope ultimately leads to more success in the coming deer season. So that's what I got for you guys today on the Bent Limbs podcast. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, do me a favor, hit the like button down below on this video. Also, don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you guys soon on the next Bent Limbs podcast. Take care. Thanks for listening.